Sometimes our emotional world feels like a battlefield. So, do you often feel like you're fighting an invisible war inside your own body? Like sounds, lights, and emotions are way too much. No one might see it, but you're not alone. Because this is sensory overload caused by complex trauma, which causes you to be easily triggered, feeling overwhelmed and burned out. And in this video today, we're breaking down why your nervous system feels like a battlefield, what the causes behind your overwhelm and shutdowns are, and a ton of resources that I collected during years of therapy that can help you surviving and calming you down. Let's get you out of that war zone. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Robert, and if you're new here, I'm not a healthcare professional myself, but instead I share a client's perspective here on this channel. As always, I want to be super real with you. At the moment, I also go through a phase again where I feel very overwhelmed and burned out. Life's so fast for me, and it feels like the past weeks passed without me being even able to process them. So even small things like noises, like crowded spaces or too many tabs open in my brain browser up here, or someone just asking me a question, whether it be in my relationship or at work, that can already cause like a tidal wave. I'm already feeling drained before I even react. So I've noticed how quickly I slip into that state of overwhelm currently, where it feels like my system just wants to shut down. And these are definitely early signs that I need a break again to recover, because once I'm there, once it's too late, then it's hard to come back from that entirely dysregulated system. So my nervous system is tired, it's raw, it's overloaded, and I need to offer myself some capacity to recover right here. So therefore, if you are there too, definitely feel you, and let's explore some possibilities here together to overcome that overwhelm and shutdown. But first, let's reveal here how complex post-traumatic stress disorder, so CPTSD, or in other words also childhood trauma, and sensory overload are somehow weirdly tied to each other. When you have experienced chronic trauma, especially in childhood, like emotional neglect, like not being seen, not being heard, being yelled at, etc., then your brain wired itself for survival, not for safety. That means your nervous system learns to constantly scan for danger, even in environments that are technically safe. And your nervous system is part of your body. So therefore, trauma is not just a mindset issue, but it's a neurological issue. It's something physical. And this state is what we are calling hypervigilance. And it doesn't just show up as anxiety or emotional distress, it shows up in your whole body through sensory overload, through shutdown, and even through pain. And I already made a full episode recently about the sensation of hypervigilance, which I will link to you up here in the description below. Studies show that people with CPTSD and early trauma are significantly more likely to develop sensory processing sensitivity and even symptoms that mimic sensory processing disorder. For example, right here in this paper from 2022, we see that trauma manifests either as hyper or hyporesponsivity to sensory input and stimuli. And when having trauma, we're also more likely to perceive incoming sensory information as alerting, even when real threat is actually absent, which then leads to frequent states of overwhelm. And it definitely makes sense, because when you grow up in unpredictable or unsafe environments, your whole system doesn't learn how to regulate naturally. So instead, it learns how to react fast and hard and how to protect you. The problem is, for us CPTSD survivors, that this state often becomes chronic. So we are in a so-called chronic hypervigilance state, where we constantly feel like walking on eggshells, we constantly feel like super thin-skinned and easily triggered. And in this state, your system stays in a kind of red alert mode, even when there is no danger around. And that's exactly when everyday life starts to feel like a threat. And for example, you wake up at night, sweat wet bath at 3:30 in the morning, being full of anxiety. Therefore, we see CPTSD doesn't just impact your emotions, it changes your entire nervous system. And that's why things like bright lights, background noises, certain smells, relationships, or even emotional tensions can become so overwhelming fast. But what if your nervous system didn't just learn to scan for danger? What if it was already wired that way from the start? Because for many people with CPTSD, there's another layer to this story. A lot of us aren't just normal trauma survivors, we're also really sensitive, highly sensitive people, or we land somewhere on the neurodivergent spectrum like ADHD or autism. That means we didn't just develop a sensitive system because of trauma. That means for some of us, we were on top of that born with a more reactive nervous system. And then you get sensory overload on a whole different level. So there are people who are generally more sensitive. This is called sensory processing sensitivity, and in everyday language, those people, we call them highly sensitive people or HSPs. You know that if you follow this channel for a longer period of time, because all of my old videos were regarding that topic. And then there are also people with neurodivergent conditions like ADHD and autism, as I said. And regarding that, by the way, there's also a huge discussion here if this is actually the same thing, maybe. If there isn't just a thing as HSP, but everyone is just neurodivergent on that spectrum, and autism and highly sensitive people are basically the same thing. I talked about this phenomenon already in this video here, which went super viral on my channel. So if you're curious about that, definitely explore this content. But let's talk about this phenomenon that I described as HSP here first. So a huge number of people with complex trauma also identify as so-called highly sensitive people. And this is a temperament, it's not a diagnosis, and it also means that your nervous system is just naturally more responsive to stimuli, more reactive or more aware. And there's this author, Dr. Elaine and Aaron. She wrote this book, The Highly Sensitive Person. I read this a couple years ago, and according to her, roughly 15 to 20% of the population are born with the trait of being a highly sensitive person, so called sensory processing sensitivity, SPS, that's the trait. And while this trait, and he describes it in his book, comes with a lot of incredible strengths as well, like deep empathy and intuition, it also means you're more likely to get overwhelmed in a chaotic, overstimulating world. That's difficult then, especially if you already have experienced trauma. And then there is neurodivergence, so people with ADHD, with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, and these things are not caused by trauma, but they do involve similar struggles with overload, emotional dysregulation, and also social fatigue. As we saw in this very popular video here on my channel, where I discuss the full overlap between CPTSD, ADHD, and autism, for many people, the real experience is actually both. So you might be highly sensitive or neurodivergent and have trauma. And the symptoms then stack on top of each other. For example, an autistic person might struggle with noise and transitions already, but if they also have CPTSD, those same things might trigger panic, shutdown, or even rage. And as I said in my other overlap videos here on the channel, the big idea here is if you felt like your nervous system has always been too much, it might not be broken, but it might be just wired differently. And once we understand that, we can stop shaming ourselves, we can start working with our systems instead of against them. So where do we start when it comes to coping with sensory overload and emotional shutdowns? Well, the very first step here is what I call trigger mapping. Because most of us often don't actually even know what's setting us off. We just know that we suddenly feel overwhelmed, shut down, or like we want to escape. Therefore, trigger mapping means becoming a detective of your own nervous system. It's a practical exercise that helps you paying attention to patterns, situations, environments, people, and even internal states that tend to overwhelm and trigger you. And for some, it's quite obvious, right? Loud noises, crowded spaces, harsh lighting, those kind of things. But for others, the triggers are more subtle. It might be the pressure of having to respond quickly in a conversation, or a shift in someone's tone, or too many open tasks on the plate, or just feeling guilty when needing to set a boundary. For me personally, it's, for example, emotional chaos. So when someone's energy is intense and unpredictable, I can feel it in my whole system, even if there's no one yelling. And the tricky thing is, these triggers are often layered. For example, a smell or a sound might not bother you unless you're already tired or emotional raw, feeling thin-skinned, easily triggered that day. So it definitely depends in which mood you are and if your nervous system is already dysregulated or not. To do this exercise, you can start tracking your responses. You can use a simple journal. Well, I have my journal right here. Just write things down. Or you can also use a worksheet, and then you can notice what's happening right before you started feeling flooded or numb. You can also write that down afterwards once you didn't realize your triggers yet. The goal here is not to avoid every trigger. That's definitely not realistic. The goal is to build awareness for your triggers, right? Trigger mapping. Because the earlier you notice the signals, the more power you have to respond differently. And at some point, you feel in advance that a trigger and overwhelm is already building up within you. And then you can react before it actually happens to you. Good. Now, once you mapped your triggers, how can you calm your overwhelm and shutdowns? Because let's be honest, once the wave hits, logic kind of goes out of the window. So the tools you use in that exact moment are definitely needed to be on your emergency plan checklist here. Here are 4 simple but powerful regulation tools. Number 1, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. This one's great for grounding during sensory overwhelm or panic. You name 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. It then gives your nervous system something to anchor into in a dysregulated state to get back into the here and now. Technique number 2 are movement skills. Movement definitely helps to shake off the freeze. If you're dysregulated and get into the dissociate, into the freeze state where you can't really move anymore and don't think clearly anymore. That might be a walk, stretching, or even just pressing your feet into the ground and tensing your muscles. The key here is to get out of the spin in your head and back into your body. I also have a full list of movement skills right here in the Re-Regulation Resources workbook. You can go through them and choose those that suit you the best. If you want to download the full workbook, just go to understandable.net/book, and then you can download the full workbook right here. Technique number 3 is the shower technique. And that's my girlfriend's favorite one. Because if you're at home, you're dysregulated, definitely try this one. What to do is, well, basically what it says, step into the shower, imagine washing off the overwhelm of your body and let the water take the emotional charge with it. Sounds simple, but it's incredibly regulating because water, temperature shifts, and tactile stimulation all help to reset your system. The pain-related skill set in our workbook, so this one here, it also offers you this technique, but in here it says cold showers. And if you try this, I can definitely tell you that it's not needed to be cold water. Cold water is definitely a good pain-related skill to get you out of the dysregulation, but it can also be warm water. It definitely helps, and somehow it regulates the whole body if you stand under the shower. I think after this video, I'm also doing that. Technique number 4, emergency exit technique. It's okay to leave, okay? Whether you're at a dinner party, whether you're in a meeting or at a family gathering, if your body is going into shutdown or panic, step away. That's okay. And this technique definitely also requires that you can set a boundary without feeling too guilty. So this is also a good practice if you have struggles with that too. Go into the bathroom, go outside, take a lap. Your safety comes first, not your social performance, right? Those exact techniques help to pull you back from the edge so your body can remember what safety feels like. Now, those grounding tools are your go-to during a crisis moment when the overwhelm is already there flooding in. But what about the other moments? What if you could shape your day-to-day life in a way that actually helps your nervous system feel less triggered in the first place? This is where long-term healing really starts, not just reacting to triggers, but learning how to design a life, an environment that suits your individual needs and that supports your regulation. Here are 3 self-care routines to manage overwhelm and sensory overload. Routine number 1, create a low-stimulation environment. Start with your physical place. Your environment is highly important when it comes to overwhelm. And I can tell you that out of a personal story that underlines that importance. When I was traveling the last time, I was away for 5 weeks, living in another country in a really spacious apartment. And when I come back that day, through the contrast of living somewhere else, I realized how small, how narrow, how tiny my place right here actually is. So I felt like living in a box somehow, that the walls are pretty close and also the ceiling. So I realized that the environment that I'm living in currently is making me feel constrained in a way and also triggering me. Therefore, you can ask yourself the question, what in your environment is constantly activating your nervous system without you even realizing it? Maybe the place you're living in is also too small for you. Maybe there's a lot of background noise around the place you're living. So try maybe noise cancelling headphones or earplug. Maybe it's harsh lighting. Switch to warm, dimmable lights or natural light. Think soft textures, clear visual space, and reducing clutter. Your brain processes all of that as input, even subconsciously. Routine number 2, a nervous system hygiene means daily self-care. What does daily self-care in terms of nervous system regulation look like? Well, first of all, I think that's definitely obvious, getting enough sleep. That's not just good for you. It literally helps you to rebuild emotional regulation capacity. Because if you recently had a bad night, you know how thin-skinned you feel the next day and how easily triggered you are. If you sleep best fully alone, like me, plan nights and here and there alone to recharge fully. If you have a partner or stay with friends, have a family. Definitely also take care for your own capacity. Sometimes you might need to step away, get a single room, and sleep in your own bed. Tech breaks are also another huge one. Constant notifications and screen time, they definitely create micro-stress spikes you may not even notice. For example, I have all my notifications off for years. When I get a message, I don't see that popping up on my phone. I check that within the app when I decide to go on the app. Routines in general are definitely helpful. So create gentle, repeatable routines, wake-up rituals, meal rhythms, midday naps and showers, as we saw before. Working from home, if you can do that, if you can plan that. Also bedtime wind downs, time alone, etc. These things give your nervous system, first of all, predictability, but also moments of calm that are planned, which then equals safety again. And routine number 3, communicate your sensory needs and set better boundaries. It definitely can feel scary at first, but one of the most powerful things you can do is letting others know what you need. And that might sound like, for example, hey, I do better with soft lighting. Do you mind if we turn this down? I just need a quiet moment before we talk about that. I'm stepping outside for a couple minutes. I'll be right back. You don't have to explain everything right here. That's not the plan. You just have to give yourself permission to protect your peace. So set boundaries. If you feel guilty around that, it's definitely understandable. And for many of us, setting boundaries is tied to feeling wrong or guilty. So I dedicated 2 full classes on those topics in our premium community. So we have class number 3 on how to recognize and communicate our needs, because this is one of the first steps, also within our pyramid, which is displayed here on the website, right? And then we have a full class on setting healthy boundaries right here. So understanding boundaries, setting boundaries without feeling guilty. Also, the topic of people pleasing and constant resentment are linked here. Definitely hugely important. So if you want to join that, just go to understandable.net, start your 7-day free trial right here, and then you can access to those courses and dig a bit deeper. Now, after hearing all this, what does real healing actually look like? I mean, long term. And it's not about finding the perfect regulation tool. It's not about fixing your nervous system once after all, even if you think that right now. Long-term healing is about how to feel safe again, consistently and over time. And that safety, that has to come from within and from around you. And I'm emphasizing that because you can't heal relational trauma without safe relationships. If you were hurt in relationships, in chaotic, unpredictable, or emotionally unsafe environments, then healing needs to happen in relationships too. That might mean finding just 1 or 2 people who truly see you, where you don't have to perform or have to explain everything, where you can slowly practice what safety actually feels like. Because again, I want to underline that regulation is not something that you do alone. That's easy for most of us, especially if you have an avoidant, disorganized attachment style, you spend a lot of time alone. But regulation and healing happens through co-regulation, through connection and through resonance. And at the same time, part of the work is learning to hold yourself, to give yourself permission to feel what you feel, to want what you want, and to need what you need. This looks like creating routines that support you, not just because they're healthy, but because they make you feel more like yourself. It means designing a life that doesn't constantly push your system into shutdown, but helps you to build capacity slowly and gently. And also being there for yourself when you feel overwhelmed and dysregulated from time to time. This is definitely top-level stuff that took me personally years to understand, but it doesn't have to take that long for you. So you can take now my knowledge and directly implement it into your life, luckily, if you want that. I have a full course on that in our class number 6 as well. So if you want to learn how to reparent yourself, how to practice self-containment, I definitely recommend you class number 6 here on building an authentic self. Again, you can join. Just go to understandable.net, start your 7-day free trial here and access our courses. I once asked my hypnotherapist, do we ever fully resolve all of this trauma and the overwhelm, the shutdown? And he said something that really stayed with me. He said, maybe it's not just about fixing every wound. Maybe the deeper work is building a life as well that wraps around your nervous system with the right routines, the right people, the right pace. That idea changed a lot for me because it made healing feel less like a destination and more like a way of being. And again, you also don't have to walk this pace alone. I share all the insights from my own therapy sessions, all the tools, resources, and practical exercises from my therapist with you. Just go to understandable.net. Okay, I'm repeating myself here, but I definitely believe that those courses might help you, that the practical exercises are worth doing, and that all of my experiences can save you a lot of time, a lot of pain, definitely. So thanks for watching, and remember, your body's not broken, it's protecting you, and you're allowed to build a life that finally feels safe. Are you also dealing with sensory overload, with overwhelm, with shutdown? Do you think it's linked to trauma or maybe to neurodivergence? If you want to share that, definitely do so in the comments below. If you want to support this project here, start your 7-day trial, become a member, and I see you next time here on the channel for a brand new video. Have a great day and hopefully less overwhelmed.